Welcome dart players one and all. Today on Straight to the Point, we are going to be counting down our top 15 dart players to never win a World Championship. And we start off with a player who is considered to be the best player to never win a world title in darts, James Wade. This game was probably his best chance of winning a world title to date. The semi-final of the World Championship back in 2011, where James Wade goes 2-0 up after an incident involving the air conditioning. James Wade made his first TV debut back in 2003 at the BDO World Championships and has been one of the best players in the world of darts ever since. Having made the switch to the PDC back in 2006, James has pretty much won everything in the game, except for, of course, a world title, despite making 3 semi-finals at the PDC World Championship. During his time in the PDC, James Wade has reached number 2 in the world on one occasion, winning the World Match Play, the World Grand Prix twice, the UK Open twice, not to mention the PDC Premier League of darts as well. But James does still have time on his side, so never say never. He's definitely got the ability. Next up, we have Simon Whitlock. This clip is from the BDO World Final back in 2008, in which he plays Mark Webster. This run to the final came as a bit of a surprise, as he'd only made his debut at the Worlds the year before. But unfortunately, while Simon was juggling, Mark was busy doing the business. Fast forward 2 years later, and Simon Whitlock finds himself in another World Final, this time in the PDC against the greatest player of all time, Mr. Philip the Power Taylor. Despite being the best finisher in the world at this time possibly, Simon Whitlock couldn't get over the line. Unfortunately for him, Phil Taylor's scoring and finishing combined was far too consistent. So there's nothing to be ashamed of losing to the best player of all time in the best form of his life, around about that time, 2010-2009. Phil wasn't losing to anyone. Next up, we have Wayne Mardle, a real legend of the game, 2-time World Semi-Finalist. This was the first World Semi-Final he made back in 2002 at the Lakeside in the BDO World Championships. An incredibly fast, fluent scorer, but unfortunately he did like to mess around a little bit, and at the end of this game he has to take a bow out of the tournament. Following up 2008, he beats Phil Taylor in one of the best games you'll ever watch for drama. And following this, he becomes favourite to win the world title. But unfortunately, he underestimates his opponent with a bit of mucking around in between. And it's the same runner-up outcome in the semi-final. And unfortunately, we never see Wayne Mardle make another semi-final at the Worlds. Next up, we have Bobby George. Now, this might be a bit of an unfair one, because Bobby George did win the News of the World Championship twice, which was considered to be a world title before the World Championships existed in the BDO. However, today it's not really classed as a world title. It's seen as a different event in its own right, albeit very prestigious still to win. So that puts him on the list, 2-time runner-up at the BDO World Championships, Bobby George. Next up, we have a 3-time BDO World Championship runner-up, Tony O'Shea. This is a clip from his first World Final in which he plays Ted Hankey. Again, Tony O'Shea, a player who won just about everything there is to win in his relevant darts organisation, and is considered to be one of the best players to never make the switch to the PDC. But an unbelievable 180 hitter with a beautiful throw, and former world number 1 as well. There we just saw him lose a World Final again then to Christian Kist, and this is his last World Final against Scott Waits. No shame in losing to this man, an absolute legend of the game in his own right. But there we have listed 3-time runner-up of the BDO Worlds, Tony O'Shea. Next up we have David Whitcomb, an incredible dart player, again with a beautiful throwing action, makes 2 World Finals back in the 80s, losing to Eric Bristow on both occasions. So again, you're playing the best player in the world at that time, in the best form of his career. So no shame in that. Dave Whitcomb won just about everything in the BDO circuit apart from the Worlds, and that is why he makes our list. Despite not winning the Worlds, he did however have an absolutely incredible career, winning the British match play as well as the News of the World, which again was originally considered to be a world title, and was a 2-time World Masters champion back in 1982 and 1985. Following this, it could only be one man. Alan Evans, probably the best player to never win a world title other than James Wade. Unfortunately, we never see the best of Alan Evans. His career sort of peaked by the late 80s when darts started to become televised. But if you go back a little further to 1975, this man, Alan Evans, won the British Open as well as the Windmill World Masters, two of the biggest tournaments in the world at that time. If there had been a world title that year, he'd have been favourite. Next up, we have Mervyn King, an absolute monster of a dart player, former BDO World number 1, and 2-time BDO World finalist. This is a clip taken from his first World Final, in which he loses out very narrowly to Tony David, a real legend of the game. Kind of a forgotten dart player, Tony David. If you don't know who Tony David is, have a look. There's a fantastic story behind him as a player. But unfortunately, Merv couldn't hit those crucial doubles right when it mattered, and Tony David couldn't miss them. Going forward a couple of years to 2004 again, Mervyn King finds himself in another World Final, this time to one of the most informed players in the world, the Viking Andy Fordham. I think it's fair to say around this time, Mervyn King had even upped his game from 2002. He played absolutely sensational in this final. It's just that Andy was better than him. Andy had just beaten Raymond van Barneveld in the round before, so that kind of shows you how good his form was at that time. And no matter what Merv did, he just couldn't seem to stop Andy Fordham from hitting these big shots, but does go on to win the World Masters shortly after, and has again come to form in recent years as well, so it's never too late. Next up on our list, we have Aaron Warriner Little, playing in the last World Final at the BDO before the notorious split in darts. At this time, Aaron Warriner was the number 1 ranked player in the world, and had played the best game of his life the night before in the semi-final against Steve Beaton, who was probably the best player in the world for form in 1993. But as you can see, he just could not get going in this final, and it wasn't long before John Lowe did the business. But Alan had an absolutely amazing career. World Grand Prix champion in 2001 in the PDC, as well as making various finals as well. Also makes 2 semi-finals back in 1999 and 2003 in the PDC Worlds. But 3 times Dutch Open winner. That's something to be proud of in itself. Next, you knew he was coming, Michael Smith, one of the fastest, most rhythmic, natural talents in the game. Did, however, win the PDC World Youth title, just seeing him take out that glorious 1-2-4 finish to keep himself in this World Final against Michael van Gerwen back in the 2019 PDC World Championship. Unfortunately, Michael van Gerwen was too good in the final, but there's still time on Michael Smith's side. Next on the list, we have Scottish darting legend Robert Thornton. I don't think anyone would argue that Robert Thornton doesn't deserve a spot on this list, as we just see this clip from the quarter-final of the BDO World Championship back in 2008, also made the quarter-final in that event in 2005 as well. Goes on to win the World Masters in the BDO back in 2007, and makes his last quarter-final at the World Championship in the PDC in 2015, so 10 years difference between his first BDO quarter-final and his last PDC quarter-final. That's some longevity there. As well as winning the Windmill World Masters back in 2007, Robert Thornton also wins the UK Open in the PDC back in 2012, as well as the World Grand Prix in the PDC in 2015, throwing some of the best averages we've ever seen in the event. And you can't argue with that. Next up, it's another blast from the past, Colin Lloyd, as we see him hit this 170 checkout to win the PDC World Match Play back in 2005. absolutely outstanding player who also won the PDC Grand Prix of Darts the year before, back in 2004. A former PDC number 1, we do see him making a little comeback in the later stages of his career as we watch this game against Michael van Gerwen, in which he plays absolutely out of his skin. This was back in 2013, where Michael van Gerwen was playing some of the best darts of his life as well, and goes on to make the final in this event, as he just saw those averages. Nothing to be ashamed of there, both over 100. But despite being world number 1, he never picks up that notorious world title. Next on the list we have a player you've all been waiting for, Dave Chisnall. As we watch this clip of him putting in some fantastic darts in his first world final back in the BDO against Martin Adams in 2010. Dave had an incredible run to this world final, beating Ted Hankey in the semi-final during the previous round. But unfortunately, Martin Adams was just too consistent for him in the final. Just this year, he played the game of his life against Michael van Gerwen in the quarter-final. He was absolutely unbeatable. But in the following round, in the semi-final against Gary Anderson, he just looked a completely different player and ended up losing the match 6-3. But he does still have time on his side. There's no doubting his ability. Next on the list, this was a tough one to put in. Dimitri van den Bergh. Partly because it's so early in his career. But when this man is on full flow, he just looks absolutely unbeatable. And he's backed that up by winning the World Match Play of Darts as well. An incredibly fast and fluent player, and most important of all, he handles the pressure like no one else. This year he was one of the favourites to win the World Championship in the earlier rounds. He did look absolutely unbeatable, but unfortunately it just wasn't to be. Next up, I'm sure many of you didn't expect to see this player on screen, Deta Hedman. But for the women's game, it is absolutely remarkable that she hasn't won a world title, being one of the best female players in the game for over 15 years now, reaching the heights of world number 1 and winning just about everything else there is to win in the women's game. But unfortunately for Deta, she never managed to cross that finishing line in a world final and make that world championship her own. That said, she's played some remarkable darts on the PDC circuit in the women's events over the last 12 months, so never say never. But that's it for today. That is my top 15 players to never win a world title. Why not leave your top 15 in the comments below, and please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Straight to the point.